This will be tape number 9 of this 12-tape set of recordings made on the Serenity Sail and the Big Book Cruise. This talk was given on Thursday evening, September the 1st, 1988, while cruising off of the coast of Cuba. On this tape, the first 3 or 4 minutes will be the conclusion of the Thursday morning discussion. And then Charlie concludes his discussion of Chapter 5, How It Works, the 4-step inventory process, and then gets into Chapter 6, Into Action, and Step 5. The total playing time for this recording will be approximately 77 minutes.
Basically, and a comment too. In reviewing the resentment list and going back through the years, medical science is now beginning to show that some people are predestined. They believe people are predestined to be alcoholics. That it's probably hereditary. But I found that in the review of the resentment from way back, way before the alcohol ever entered my body, that I had what would be considered alcoholic thinking.
Sure.
And reaction.
Sure.
And before I'd ever taken my first drink as such, then so I was basically, in my opinion, I was alcoholic in my feelings, in my the way I coped and dealt with things, right from the get-go.
Yeah, of course, everybody is this way to a certain extent. Perhaps we alcoholics are an extreme example of this. I think what we're really dealing with is human nature. Some of us are more prone to resentment than others are. And our book tells us we had to get down to causes and conditions. Alcohol is but a symptom. Overeating is but a symptom. Gambling is but a symptom. Sex is but a symptom. All those things that we become so obsessed with, they aren't really the problem. The problem is, how do we feel when we're not doing those things? And that stems from human nature. People today tell me, they say, Charlie, you don't understand. People are different today. And I say, well, I know they're different. Well, the first 100 are already dead and gone. And they say, you don't understand, though. This is 1988. And those people lived in 1939. And I said, I know that. I know that for sure. They said, you don't understand. Places change. I said, I know that. They were in Akron, Cleveland, New York City. We're out here in the middle of the ocean. I said, there was one thing you don't understand, is that we're dealing with human nature. And human nature never changes. You know, it's the same today that it was 2,000 years ago. It's the same as it was when Solomon talked about the alcoholic in the Bible. Human nature never changes because it's built on those 3 basic instincts of life, and a threat to them brings resentment. Now, we may not get rid of all resentment. Some resentment probably is okay if used correctly. For instance, if I'm living, Joe loves to tell this, he says, if I'm living in the neighborhood and it's all run down, and everybody's house is about the same, he said, then I'm satisfied. And I sit on my front porch and I rock and I rock and I rock and I rock. And he said, somebody moves in across the street, though, and buys that piece of property, and they begin to paint that house and fix the broken window. He said, I resent the hell out of them. Who in the hell are they moving into the neighborhood, screwing up the whole damn neighborhood? And he said, if I use that resentment right, then that'll cause me to get some paint and window panes and fix my own house. And then my neighbor then will resent me, and he'll fix his house. And the next thing you know, God's got a complete new neighborhood. But we alcoholics don't use them right. We'll sit there and we'll rock and we'll rock and we'll resent, and 30 days later, we'll go over at midnight and burn his damn house down. That's what we'll do, see. Resentments make us competitive if used correctly. Resentment is a way of letting the strong come to the top. Now, in the other animal world, they kill each other. But in the human world, since we're supposedly civilized, we supposedly quit killing each other. But whoever rises to the top, some of the others of us resent them, and we try to tear them down. And there's a way to always bring the strongest to the top in the human race is through resentment if used correctly. But most people don't use them correctly. Most people just let them fester. And they don't cause us to do anything constructive, and they eventually just completely eat us up and cause us to do things we normally would not do anyhow, if used correctly. We'll never be completely free of resentment, but we can be free of it to the extent that God intended for us to be free of it. And then we can have the peace of mind and happiness. Okay?
This will conclude the Thursday morning discussion of Chapter 4, How It Works, and the fourth step, Inventory Process. Following a 10-second pause, Charley will conclude his discussion of Chapter 5, How It Works, the fourth step in the inventory process, plus Chapter 6, Into Action, and Step 5. The following will be Charley's conclusion of his discussion on Chapter 5, How It Works, the fourth step inventory process, and the first part of Chapter 6, Into Action, Step 5.
Left off this morning dealing with our inventory process. Hopefully we were able to see that done the way the big book says to do it. It's a reasonably simple thing to do. Not necessarily easy, but reasonably simple to do. Hopefully we could see that there's really nothing to be afraid of in this kind of inventory. All we've really done is list those resentments, those things that we continue to refeel over and over and over in our head. We analyzed them out by first putting down the names and then putting down what they did that we resented them so badly for, and then putting down the part of self that was affected. And then finally we ended up in the fourth column to see the part that we played and the exact nature of that resentment. And hopefully we can begin to see that in the majority of these resentments, we ourselves did something to set the ball rolling. We look to see the part we played, and we begin to find that this old personality over here, which had developed from being the selfish, self-centered character that we were, caused us to go out and do things which invariably hurt people and then caused those people to retaliate against us, and in turn then caused us to resent them. And then we could see as we played that resentment over and over and over and over and over in our head that every time we played it, they got a little worse and we got a little better, until finally we could transfer all blame from ourselves to other people. And I really believe as practicing alcoholics we have become the world's best at that. And I really believe it's something that's absolutely necessary for us to be able to do as a practicing alcoholic in order to be able to live with ourselves. I don't really think we could live with ourselves looking at truthfully the things we do while drinking. But through a resentment we can most certainly transfer the blame to other people. And really, the only thing I've used the first three columns for is to arrive at this fourth column. You see, I never could sit down before and see where I was at fault, because I never bothered to analyze our resentment out. And through this little process of analyzing these resentments, it allows us to truthfully, morally, honestly look at ourselves for the first time in our lives. You see, after I've done one, then one leads to two. I don't even bother about one anymore, because then I got two down here. And two leads to three, and after I've done three, I don't need two anymore. Well, three finally leads me over here to the fourth column. And in looking at this and seeing the things that I need to change, if I could in the future get rid of some of these character defects such as selfishness, such as dishonesty, such as being self-seeking and frightened and inconsiderate, then surely I'll quit doing some of those things that I used to do. And then surely I'll quit hurting people, and then surely they won't be retaliating against me. And remember always that you can't have a vacuum in your head. If I can find a process now to get rid of these things, then they'll have to be replaced by something else. And of course they'll always be replaced by the good God-given things within us. If I can become less selfish, then selfishness will be replaced by unselfishness. If I can find a way to get rid of dishonesty, then that's going to be replaced by honesty. If I can find a way to get rid of fear, then that's going to be replaced by courage, and so on and so forth. And then surely I'll have a chance to have a better life in the future. Also, the last thing we looked at today is in the fact that really laid out this way. We've got all the information we need for steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, resentment-wise, laid out on this chart. Oh, this whole thing was 4. This is what we talked about in 3. Then we're going to see the things that we're going to talk about to another human being in step 5. We have in the 4th column those things we're going to become willing to turn loose of. And we have those things we're going to ask God to take away. And then for most of us, to our amazement, many of the names in this column turn out to be people we've harmed in the past. And this really did kind of blow my mind when I saw that, because I'd never really carried a resentment any further than just to look at what they did to me. I had never honestly looked at what I did to them. And I found for my own self now, and I'm sure it's not true with everybody, but for my own self, every name on this column is something or somebody I had done something to. And they, of course, are going to come off of there now and go on to step 8 and 9 that I'm going to be using at a later date. Again, do we have any questions there? Do we have any comments or anything we need to cover before we go any further? Okay, Bill, then, is now going to have us look at the second common manifestation of self. And he's going to show us basically the same set of instructions to look at fears that we had for looking at resentments. Are just going to be worded a little bit differently. The second common manifestation of self is fear. And fear blocks us off from the sunlight of the Spirit just like resentment does. And a selfish, self-centered person is one who's always afraid and always making decisions based on fear and taking actions based on fear, which invariably end up hurting other people. And I think fear is just about as bad as resentment. Maybe not quite as bad, but most certainly it falls in that same category. And I've made a decision to let God direct my mind, and if fear directs it for me, then God most certainly can't. Just like if resentment's directed for me, then God can't. At the bottom of page 67, he says, notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and the wife. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did not we ourselves set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. Now he gives us a little simple set of instructions. He says, we reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper even though we had no resentment in connection with them. Well, of course, that would be column 1, listing our fears from top to bottom. Now, many of us like to say that, well, we don't have much fear. We men especially, we like to say, well, hell, we don't have much fear. We're tough, we're macho. But we're not talking about physical fear to begin with. We're talking about these fears that run through our mind all the time. And everybody that I know of has certain fears. One fear, we fear what other people think about us. Certainly we do. We have fears connected with our job. We have fears connected with our spouse. We have fears connected with our children. We have fears connected with and with and with and with and with and with. And I think what happened to me is when I began to list these fears, again, I was absolutely amazed at how much fear I really did have. But I'd never attempted to put them down on a piece of paper, and you can only see one fear at a time in your head, just like you could only see one resentment at a time. But as I began to fill out sheet after sheet after sheet after sheet, I began to realize that fear does dominate my thinking to a great extent, just like resentment did. And I was absolutely amazed by that knowledge. So we carefully list those fears. In column 1, we made up a little example here. I can find it. Yeah, they're out of order, but that's all right. Here's one that shows the first 2 columns. The first column is a fear of the Internal Revenue Service. Anybody else in here besides me ever fear the Internal Revenue Service? Every damn fall when I file income tax, or every spring. I have my wife on here. You know, Barbara's name appeared on a resentment sheet. To my amazement, she also appears on the fears sheet. Somebody put the word Sue on here. Joe had some of these made out during one of the sessions down there. People in general, and we could just continue to list a whole lot of fears. We go back to column 2 and we say, well, why do we have that fear? Now, this is not an attempt to psychoanalyze ourselves. I'm not going to say I'm afraid of the dark because Mother didn't change my diapers right when I was a year and a half old. Some fears are good, just like some resentment is good. Fear brings caution. And without some caution, you know, I probably couldn't live in this world. I think a fear of the dark, to a very great extent, is a normal type of fear. Why do I fear the dark? Because I don't have headlights and I can't see at night. And a fear of the dark brings caution for me. It only becomes a problem when it begins to dominate me to the extent that I can't even go outside in the dark, then it becomes a real problem. But when it brings normal caution, that type of fear is great. I might be afraid of the heights. Well, why am I afraid of heights? I don't have wings and I can't fly. That's a pretty good fear. Now, I may be afraid of what other people think of me, and sometimes that is a good fear if it doesn't dominate my life, if I don't carry it too far. You know, we probably couldn't even have this meeting tonight without some fear. If we didn't really fear what we think of each other, we might tell each other the truth here in this meeting, what we really think of each other. And if we did, we may break this meeting up pretty damn fast if we were 100% honest in that area. So we're not going to get rid of all fear, but maybe we can get it to the level that God intended. When I ask myself, why do I have the fear? In this case, it's obvious. The reason I fear the Internal Revenue Service, I cheated on my tax and I might be fined or go to jail. The reason I fear my wife is because she might take the house away from me still yet because of the infidelity and those things that happened back there 17, 18, 19 years ago. I still have fear connected with that today. You know, before Barbara ever really does find out all those things, I mean, I hope to hell she doesn't, but if she ever does, she might go ahead and file for divorce today. And I find her name on the fears list as well as I found it on the resentment sheet. Here they put down Sue. The fear there is Sue might tell of the infidelity. People in general, how they might perceive me. There's some basis for every fear that we've got. And I think we're going to find the same as resentments. Most of them come from something that we ourselves have put in motion. I think of fear regarding my children. There was a time that I fooled myself and I said the reason I have these fears connected with my children is because I want them to turn out good. I want them to have a better life. I don't want those things. No, that isn't the truth, though. The real reason I have those fears connected with my children is if they don't turn out right, what the hell are people going to think about me as their father if they turn out to be bums? And when I really get down to these things and really begin to look at them, I'm amazed at what comes out of this kind of stuff. In the third column, I do the same thing that I did with resentments. I look to see what part of self is affected. Working always from top to bottom, I look to see if it's a threat to my self-esteem, a threat to my personal relationships, a threat to my material security. I can't feel fear unless there is some kind of threat to some of these basic instincts of life. And again, I begin to see certain patterns develop. And I begin to see that certain parts of these basic instincts have really given me a problem in the past. Now, it's going to be a combination of all, but usually there will be certain things that will stand out more clearly than other things as I begin to do that third column. In the fourth column, I go to what's the exact nature of the wrong. Well, the fear is the wrong. The fear is what blocks me off from the sunlight of the Spirit. The fear is what causes me to do those things that create the problems that I have with other people. But what's the nature of it? You know, I even had to go look up the word nature. I always thought nature dealt with birds and bees only, but I find that nature is defined also as the inherent characteristic of something. What is at the core of it? Now, the fear is the wrong, but what's at the core of the wrong? What's within me that causes that fear to begin with? And if I wasn't so selfish, I wouldn't be so fearful. If I wasn't so dishonest, I wouldn't have cheated the Internal Revenue Service in the first place. If I wasn't so dishonest, I wouldn't have been lying to my wife about those things that I'm doing out there. If I wasn't so frightened, I wouldn't be doing some of the things that I do. If I was more considerate of my wife, my children, and other people, I wouldn't have been doing those things. And I find the same character defects involved in fear that I found involved in resentment. And if I don't change these things in that fourth column, there simply is no way that I'm ever going to be able to live and have any peace of mind. Because if fear continues to dominate me, I'm going to stay selfish. I'm going to stay dishonest. I'm going to stay inconsiderate, and etc. And if I stay that way, I'm going to keep on doing things that creates more fear in general. And even if they don't catch me, I've got to be scared to death they're going to. And if God really dwells within me, then I'm going to have to feel some shame and guilt and remorse connected with those things. And certainly, I block myself off from any chance of having peace of mind and serenity in the future. And eventually, the mind tends to want to go back to taking a drink in order to feel better. We find the same thing connected here that we did with resentment. When we finish this sheet up, we're going to find that we've got everything we need for steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, fear-wise. In the third column, these are the things we talked about in step 3. The whole sheet is step 4 on fears. And then in 5, we've got the exact nature of the wrong we're going to talk to the other human being about. In 6, the defects of character we're going to become willing to get rid of. In 7, those things we're going to ask God to take away. And over here on this list, we're going to have some more names to go on step 8 and 9. And I think what is really revealing to me is many of these names on this fear sheet appeared also on the resentment sheet. You know, those people I'm harmed, I'm really afraid of them too. What are they going to say the next time I run into them? What are they going to say if they really find out what I did to them? So on and so on and so on and so forth. And I see many names, not always, but I see many names popping up over and over and over again. Now, if I can do this as the book says, I not only will be able to list and analyze fears, but my book is now going to show me how to get rid of those fears, and it's going to show me how to keep them from coming back in the future. It said we reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we had no resentment in connection with them. We asked ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. Perhaps there is a better way. We think so. For we're now on a different basis. Where beforehand we trusted on self only, self-reliance, we're now on the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God rather than our finite self. We are in the world to play the role He assigned. Just to the extent that we do as we think He would have us and humbly rely on Him, does He enable us to match calamity with serenity. We never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality the way of weakness. Paradoxically, it is the way of strength. The verdict of the age is there that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage.
A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The GT and Kiss Me Dining Room, they're now open for all passengers on second sitting.
I don't think you ought to dub those out of these tapes. Shit, I think they would be hilarious. I believe you ought to leave them in there. Don't you all think you ought to leave those in these tapes? I think they would be hilarious. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. We never apologize for God. Instead, we let Him demonstrate through us what He can do. Now, here's the second prayer in step 4. We ask Him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what He would have us be. At once, we commence to outgrow fear. So we can use fear or prayer to overcome fear, just like we use prayer to overcome resentments. And if we use this prayer and we ask God at once to direct our attention to what He would have us be, at once, that's a promise, at once we commence to outgrow fear. And through the use of the prayer, through the analyzing, the same thing's going to happen with fear that did with resentments. When you get all these fears down on paper and analyze them and look at them, most of them appear pretty stupid. Just like resentments did. They do look dumber than hell when you put them on paper. And a lot of them are going to disappear simply because we don't like to appear as stupid people. But there's going to be some that are so deeply ingrained that we've had all of our life, we're probably going to have to use prayer and ask God to remove those things from us. And I think we'll find the same thing with fear that we did with resentment. Some of them we may not want to turn loose of. You know, the lady in the book used resentment as reasons for lack of education, for her marital failure. She blamed her alcoholism on it, and she didn't want to get rid of that resentment. We can do the same thing with fear. You see, fear can keep me from doing things that I would really like to do. I find one thing common among AA people is after we've sobered up and got our lives straightened out, many of us would like to go back to school. But many of us are scared to death to go back to school. We're so afraid that we can't make the grade, or we're afraid that we're too old and other people are going to laugh at us. And fear will keep us from doing something that we really would like to do, and probably there's no reason for us not to do that. In all my life, I've wanted to build a set of kitchen cabinets. But I never would build a set of kitchen cabinets because I knew in my mind that they wouldn't turn out right, there would be too many mistakes, and people would see it and laugh at it, and that would embarrass the hell out of me. I just couldn't stand that thought. Well, now that I've been sober a number of years and I've worked the program, by golly, I built myself a set of kitchen cabinets. Now, they don't look worth a damn, but I don't care anymore, see? That fear has been removed from me. Now, not only can we use fear to justify not doing something we should do, we can use fear to continue to justify doing things we should not be doing. See, I can use fear to justify stealing. Oh, yeah. If I need that money real bad for some reason, something I've just got to have, and I'm scared to death, I'm not going to get it, you let me play with that a while in my mind, and I can use fear to justify doing something I shouldn't do. I can use fear to justify extramarital affairs. Oh, yeah, I can use fear to justify a lot of things. And sometimes I really don't want to turn loose of some of that, and the only way I'm going to get rid of some of those things is with God's help. The book recognizes every step from step 3 on that self cannot overcome self. Every step takes part in the removal of self-will. And the only way we can really work and use these steps is through the asking of God's help to be willing to do these things and then to give us the strength and the power and the things that we need to do them. But just think, we can become relatively free of fear, just like we became relatively free of resentment. We'll not lose all fear, because some fear is needed to bring about caution. But we can get rid of those fears that drive us and dominate us and block us off from God's will and cause us to do the things that we really shouldn't be doing. And certainly when they're gone, then life is going to be better. Then in that 4th column, if I can do something about changing that old personality over there, then I can be relatively free of fear in the future. You know, my God, this is something I've never experienced before in my life. To be able to go through life and not have so much fear that it keeps me from functioning. Now, a few years ago, you wouldn't have got me to come on this cruise by myself. Hell, I would have been scared to death of what people would think of me. I would have been scared to death that people are always watching me. I would have said, I don't have my wife with me, I won't fit in, and I would have found 1,000 excuses to not come on this cruise. But today, the majority of those fears have been removed, and I can function like a normal human being is supposed to function. The only way I could do that before is when I had a drink inside of me, and then I could do any of those things. See, alcohol gave me courage. That's one of the reasons I loved alcohol. Well, I'm amazed that God gives me the same kind of courage, and He don't give me no hangovers in the morning. Isn't that great? Isn't that great? Okay, another damaged and unsaleable goods has been dealt with now. As fear disappears, it will be replaced by the opposite of that. And the opposite of fear is faith and courage. Faith and courage. I find myself able to do many things today that I could never do before, because now I have the courage to do those things. Fear has been replaced. And in that part of my mind that used to be dominated by fear, I now have courage. And another part of my mind is filled with peace and serenity and happiness. And I'm in much less chance of getting drunk in that part of my head than I was before. You see, step 4 is not a negative step. Step 4 is a positive thing. As we do those things begin to disappear from us, and we really do begin to change. Our personality change is already taking place right here. Remember, we're building a wonderfully effective spiritual structure. And we're in the process of building it as we go through step 4. We do not have to wait till we get to the end of the steps to get something out of these things. Okay, page 68, bottom of the page. Now about sex. Many of us need an overhauling there. Now, you older fellas, don't get your hopes up. You know, this really is not going to deal too much with physical sex. It's going to deal mainly with emotional sex or sex in the mind. You know, every species on the face of the earth has been given this basic sex instinct to reproduce themselves. Not only do we human beings have it, everything has it. Every animal, every plant, everything that we know of on the face of the earth in some way reproduces itself. Now, the only difference with the other species on the face of the earth is they do not have any choice in the matter. Their sex life is governed strictly by God. And they do their sex in the way that God wants them to, and the way and when God wants them to. Normally, any other animals on the face of the earth, God reserves a particular time of the year for them to start their reproduction cycle. And when it's time for that to take place, he usually signifies that by some physical change in the female. Then the male will sense that change, and the male prepares himself, and the two come together, and it's kind of like bang, bang, thank you, ma'am. Because as soon as they get through with it, then they're done with it. Now, they didn't think about doing it beforehand, because they don't have self-will. They can't reason. They can't make decisions. They don't think about it while they're doing it, and they don't think about it when they get through with it. And you see very few species on the face of the earth that have sexual problems other than human beings. Oh, once in a while you'll see it in another animal, but very, very seldom. You just don't see other animals on psychiatrists' couches talking about sexual problems. That just doesn't happen in their lives, because they do that at God's direction. Therefore, it is good for them, and it works out the way it ought to be. But God made you and I different. He made us different the day he gave us self-will, and he gave us the ability to think, and the ability to make choices, and the ability to make decisions. And I think most of the troubles, sexual troubles of the human race, are traceable right back to that thing called self-will, because that determines how we think about it. And how we think about it determines what we're going to do about it. As you see, we have choices. Why, we can have sex anytime we want to. We don't have to wait for any particular time of the year. We can have sex with anybody we want to. We can have sex as many times as we want to, as long as we can withstand it physically. We can have sex in any position we want to. And we can have sex with as many different people as we want to. Now, the other animals don't have that choice, but we do. Now, because of that choice, you're going to find that most human beings in the world have divided themselves into two camps, and the book begins to talk about that. He said, but above all, we tried to be sensible on this question. It's so easy to get way off the track. Here we find human opinions running to extremes, absurd extremes perhaps. One set of voices cry that sex is a lust of our lower nature, a base necessity of procreation. And you and I have heard those voices all of our lives. They're the ones that say sex is a dirty thing, and it only ought to be used for one purpose only, and that's to reproduce the human race, and it only ought to be done in one position only, and to enjoy it is a sinful thing. My God, I've heard them over and over and over and over all my life. Now, that's one set of voices to the extremes on one side. Then we have the voices who cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage, who think that most of the troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. They think we do not have enough of it, or that it isn't the right kind. They see its significance everywhere. And we hear that set of voices today. Now, they're the ones that say you ought to be able to do sex anytime you want to, as many times as you want to, in any position you want to, with as many people as you want to, and you ought to be able to enjoy it every time, and if you don't, there's something wrong with you. Now, I think that set of voices today they might call the sexual revolution. And about the only thing I really see wrong with that is that it happened about 25 years too late for me to participate in it. You know, I never really got to get into that kind of, oh boy, that would have been a hell of a lot of fun if I could have withstood it. But one set of voices is on one side of the picture, and the other set's on the other side of the picture. He says, one school would allow man no flavor for his fare, and the other would have us all on a straight pepper diet. And then he said, we want to stay out of this controversy. We do not want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. We all have sex problems. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about them? And I read that with absolute, complete relief. Because I just knew first that this book was going to condemn me for what I'd been in the past. And I also knew that this book was going to tell me what I was going to have to do with my sex life in the future, and I already made up my mind that I was going to tell them to go square to hell. That nobody was going to tell me what to do in that area, and to my great relief, I found out the book's not going to do that at all. It's not going to get involved in any controversy regarding sex. The book does not make a moral issue of sex in any form whatsoever. What it does do is give us a chance to look at our sexual problems and also give us a chance to decide on an individual basis what we're going to do about those sexual problems. You know, if I'm doing sex in such a manner that it hurts other people, then surely those people are going to retaliate against me. And surely they're going to create pain and suffering for me in the future. If I'm wanting to do sex in ways that I can't do sex with other people, then surely that's going to create some restless irritability and discontent on my part. If I'm doing things that I don't want other people to find out in the sexual area, then surely that's going to fill my mind with fear. And those feelings in my mind from those sexual things are going to block me off from the sunlight of the Spirit, just like resentments do and just like fear does. And my book is going to give me an opportunity to take a look at my sex life by first reviewing my past sex life, and then it's going to give me a way to determine what it ought to be in the future, so that I may be able to get a handle on this sexual thing and may be able to find a way to live with it and still have serenity and peace of mind and happiness at the same time. And if I can do that, then certainly I'm going to be a hell of a lot happier than I used to be. He said, we reviewed our own conduct over the years past, and we've made up another little sheet because we see basically the same identical instructions worded a little differently for the sex conduct sheet as we did for resentment and fear. For instance, he said, where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? That's column 4. Whom had we hurt? That's column 1. Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? That's column 2. Where were we at fault? What should we done instead? We got this all down on paper and looked at it. Now, this is really a very simple thing. We do the same thing here we did with resentment and fear. We carefully review our past, and we make a list of those people that we have hurt by our sexual conduct or misconduct of the past. And most of us, in some way or other, have hurt other people in the sexual area. Many ways we do so. You know, if we're in a relationship with another human being, we human beings are different than other animals because we have emotions involved with that. And if we're in a relationship with another human being and then we go outside of that relationship and have sex over here, and the person in the relationship, such as our spouse, finds out about that, then certainly we've hurt our spouses. If we've got children in our family, then certainly that spouse and their reaction to what we've done, in a majority of the cases, that ends up creating pain and suffering for the children also. If the one who had sex with outside of marriage, if it's found out, then surely I've hurt her also. And if she has children, surely I've hurt her children too. And if she's married, then surely I've hurt her spouse also. You see, one sexual thing can end up hurting 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 different people quite easily when I go out and do some of those things I shouldn't do. Some of us create jealousy, suspicion, and bitterness in the minds of other people on purpose. Maybe we're in a relationship and that other human being's not paying attention to us like we think they should, and we say, by golly, I know how to fix that. And we begin a casual flirtation with another member of the opposite sex in order to create jealousy and suspicion in this one here. And it works real good in most cases. And surely when we're using sex in that area, we're actually hurting another human being, even though we ourselves are not doing anything absolutely wrong sexually. We hurt another human being by creating jealousy and suspicion. Maybe we demand more than our fair share of sex. Maybe in our relationship we want sex so badly that we begin to demand more and more and more sex when our partner really doesn't want to have that much sex. And if we continue to demand more than our fair share, surely that ends up in emotional pain and suffering for another human being. Maybe we're in a sexual situation and we withhold sex. Maybe we've become callous and cold, and we don't give sex as we should in our relationship with another human being. And surely we hurt that other human being by withholding sex just as much as we would if we demanded too much sex. Sometimes we hurt another human being by demanding they have sex with us in ways that they don't particularly want to. And we insist on doing so, and in many, many times we create pain and suffering for them. See, we're not talking so much about physical pain that we cause as the pain of the emotional makeup in the mind itself. And we hurt many, many people in this way. I think all of us, if we would carefully review our past, we would find in some way or other we've hurt other human beings in the sexual area, even though we may not have gone out and done anything actually wrong outside of the relationship, but surely we've created some pain and suffering. And our book asks us to list those names. In this little example here, again, we have the word my wife, and we have the word lady friend, and we got Peggy, and we got Joanne, and we could have Bill, and we could have William, and we could have Sue, and we could have lots of different names on that list. And to the best of our ability, we list those people. Then we go to column 2, and what did we do? Well, we hurt the wife because we committed adultery. We hurt the lady friend because we used her for sexual purposes only, cared nothing about her, period, except for the sexual favors. We had sex with Peggy in order to get even with our wife. You know, the wife kept raising hell about certain things, and we finally said, by God, we'll show her. And we just go out there and do some of those things. And the reverse is true. Sometimes we use sex to get even with a husband, too, if we happen to be of the female gender. There's various different things that we do that hurt other people. Now, I think what's really going to happen to us, though, is when we get into this third column, we're going to begin to look at what part of self causes this. And you would think in most cases where we have done something sexually to hurt another human being, it would be caused by the sex instinct. And once in a great while it will be. You know, sometimes to get the emotional release and the physical gratification that comes at the moment of successful completion of the sex act, sometimes we're doing it because of the sex instinct. But I found in my own life that the majority of the things that I did that hurt other people sexually was not caused by the sex instinct. It was caused by the other two basic instincts of life. As you see, as a young boy growing up, I learned at a very early age that you can use sex to build your self-esteem. You know, after all, the more members of the opposite sex you can attract to yourself, the greater man you really are, and the more you think about yourself. And I found that you could use that sex and build that self-esteem, and if that's what we're using it for, then that's not really what God intended for it to be used for. He intended for it to be used to reproduce the human race, and He made it pleasurable so that we would do it. And I think if we're using it for pure pleasure or if we're using it to reproduce, in either case it's okay as long as it's not hurting another human being. But that isn't what I used it for. I used it to build self-esteem. Now, we boys call that John Wayneism, and I see every man in here shaking his head. Yeah, we call that John Wayneism. I don't know what you girls call it. But some of you tell me you had the same problem. You found that the more members of the opposite sex you could attract to yourself, the greater you felt about yourself, and you used sex to build self-esteem. You know, we can use sex to buy a personal relationship. Maybe we're just lonesome. Or maybe we just want another human being to pay attention to us. And we found out that we could give sex and buy back a personal relationship with another human being. Now, if that's what we're using sex for, it certainly is not what God intended for it to be used for. It's to be used to satisfy emotional security and the social instinct more so than by the sex instinct itself. You know, we can use sex to buy material security. Sometimes we're in a sexual relationship we really would rather not be in, but we've become so overly dependent upon that other human being to satisfy us materially that we give sex in order to buy back material security. Now, if that's what we're using it for, that is not really what God intended for it to be used for. Sometimes we use sex to get even with another human being. You know, they're going out there and they're doing things they shouldn't do, and we find out about that and we say, by God, we'll show them, and we'll go out there and do the same damn thing. Now, the fallacy in that is that after we've done it, we really can't afford to tell them we did it. But there we're using sex not to reproduce, not for enjoyment, but to get even with another human being. You know, we can use sex to force our will on another human being. Sometimes they aren't doing what we think they ought to do. And we say, by golly, we'll show them. We'll just cut them off at the pass, and we won't let them have any until they come around our way of thinking. Now, we boys aren't too good at that. We only last 2 or 3 days. But I'll guarantee you, you girls have honed it to perfection. You know exactly how to do that, and I don't blame you. You know, if I could use it with as much success as you can, I'd damn sure use it also. But there, we're not using sex for the purpose of pleasure or reproduction. We're using it to force other people to bend to our will, and we're doing it by withholding sex from them. So there's lots of ways that we use sex other than what God intended for it to be used for. I see nothing wrong with having pleasurable sex. I think it's one of the finest things that a human being can experience, and I see nothing wrong with having sex to reproduce the human race. But when we begin to use it for things other than those two things, then we're beginning to pervert the use of it. And almost invariably, sooner or later, someday, it's going to backfire on me when I do that. Because that's going to create some problems for other people. And then sooner or later, they're going to retaliate and create pain and suffering for me. And I think as I did this, and as I filled out that third column, I got 2 things out of this, which has meant more to me, I think, than anything else has. The first thing happened to me as I filled out the third column, guilt began to disappear. I began to realize that I'm not just a dirty, filthy old man. And like most human beings, I was using sex for purposes other than what God intended, and I was using them really to fulfill the other 2 basic instincts of life. I wasn't doing sex because I'm bad. I was doing sex outside of marriage and doing those things that I did because I'm a sick human being just like everybody else. You know, I used to think I was oversexed. Today I find out that isn't true. I'm really undersecure is what my problem was. And I was using that sex to build my security. And the day I realized that, then the desire to go out and do those things that I shouldn't be doing became less and less and less. When I once saw what I'm using sex for, then I began to get a handle on this sex thing, and I find out it's a hell of a lot easier to control it after that than it was before. Of course, age has got a little something to do with that too, you know. But I find some people my age which are still doing the same thing, and they think they're oversexed. Hell, they're not oversexed. They're just undersecure, and they use sex to build that security. And that was a great relief for me to find that out. Now, after I've looked at these things, and after I've analyzed them, I still go to that 4th column. What's the exact nature of the wrong? Well, the wrong is the thing I did to hurt another human being. So what's the nature of the wrong? What's within me that causes those things in the first place? And the same thing is true. That old personality of mine caused me to continue to do those things that continually hurt other people. You know, if I hadn't been so selfish, I wouldn't have been out here doing these things outside of marriage that ends up hurting my wife. If I wasn't so dishonest, I wouldn't be doing those things and running around and telling lies about it in the first place. If I wasn't so frightened that I'm getting to be 40 years old, and if I don't hurry up and get all of it I can get right now, that's the best excuse I ever found in my life. If I don't get all of it I can get now, I'll get so old I can't get it. That fear drove me to do things that I normally would not do outside of marriage. If I'd have been a little more considerate of my wife and my children, I wouldn't have been out there doing those things in the first place. And if I don't change that old personality out there, I'm going to keep right on doing the same thing. If I stay selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, inconsiderate, then I'm going to use sex just like I've always used it, and I'm going to keep on hurting people just like I've always hurt them. So I begin to see the reasoning behind these things in the big book. And I begin to see those things within me that have to be changed if I don't want to continue to do that same stuff in the future and continue to hurt people and continue to have them to retaliate against me. The big book in no way draws moral pictures on sex. Because, you know, sex is different in different parts of the world. And our book is designed to fit any human being anywhere. And I'll guarantee you what's acceptable sex in Maysville, Arkansas, by God, it might be different somewhere else. And I'll guarantee you what's acceptable out there in San Francisco is probably not acceptable in Little Rock, Arkansas. And in different... Yeah. The sex maniac said, yeah, it is. That does. I love it. I love it. I love it. Oh, I love alcoholics. Third paragraph, page 69. In this way, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex lives. We subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? Big book doesn't care how you do sex. You know, if you want to do sex hanging upside down from a tree limb by your toenails, that's fine with the big book. But if you forcing another human being to hang upside down by their toenails from that tree limb and have sex with you when they don't want to, then that's probably for selfish reasons only. And that's the main test we put on sex. Is it for selfish purposes only? And if it is, chances are we're going to be hurting another human being. We ask God to mold our ideals and help us to live up to them. We remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised and loathed. Whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. We must be willing to make amends where we've done harm, provided that we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. Now, there's twice already in the last two paragraphs we've used prayer here in step 4. Already we've used it twice in the sex thing. God alone can judge our sex situation. Counsel with other persons is often desirable. We let God be the final judge. We realize that some people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice. Now, I think this is one area that we do need to be careful. I found out in my own life that if I want to do something wrong sexually, and I know it's wrong, that if I will talk to enough people in AA and seek their advice, eventually I'll find one that will agree with me and let me go ahead and do that thing I've been wanting to do. And the book says we avoid hysterical thinking or advice. We realize that some people are fanatical about sex as others are loose about sex. We let God judge our sex situation. Now, if God dwells within each of us, and I'm sure that he does, I think we already know what's right and what's wrong. You know, I've never been in a sexual situation that was wrong that I didn't know it was wrong before I ever got into it. Now, that didn't keep me from getting into it, but I sure as hell knew it was wrong before I ever got into it. I've never stolen that I didn't know I stole. I don't really believe I've ever told a lie that I didn't know I lied, because God does dwell within me, and I really do know the difference in right and wrong. And we let that little word inside ourselves be the final judge in the sexual situation. If we feel that it might be wrong, then chances are we might not ought to do it, because invariably it's going to hurt somebody else. And we're not drawing moral lines. We're thinking about what's going to happen to us in the future. Now, people come to me today and talk about a sexual problem, what they're wanting to do, and et cetera, et cetera. I say, sure, go right ahead and do it. But I want you to know one thing. You're going to have to pay a price for it. Sooner or later, if we do sex for the wrong reasons, we're going to hurt people, and then those people are going to retaliate against us. And even if they don't catch us, we're going to have to be afraid that they're going to catch us. And if it's the wrong thing, then we're going to have guilt and remorse, and we're going to pay the price. Now, we're big enough to do any damn thing we want to do. But when we do that, I think we need to fully realize that we're going to have to be big enough to pay the price of whatever happens in the future also. And I don't think we need anybody to tell us how to do sex. I think we all know what we should do and what we shouldn't do. Suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. Does this mean we're going to get drunk? Well, some people tell us so, but this is only a half-truth. It depends on us and our motives. If we're sorry for what we have done and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will be forgiven and will have learned our lesson. If we're not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. We are not theorizing. These are facts out of our experience. To sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable sexual situation, or questionable situation, for sanity, and for the strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the imperious urge when to yield would mean heartache. And I think this is the ultimate tool that you and I have, not only when sex is very troublesome, but when we have a lot of other kind of problems. To get out there and start working with another human being. To get out there and start working with another alcoholic. To get our mind involved on what another human being needs and how we can help them and how we can make their life better. Because you see, when I'm thinking about them, then I'm out of my store. And when I'm out of my store, it seems as though God can sneak in and do a little cleaning up while I'm gone. But any time I'm in there, God can't get in there. And the only time that I'm ever really free from self is when I'm helping another human being, especially another alcoholic, say. And I think that's the answer to the majority of our problems. If we'll just force ourselves to do those things to help another human being, then God's going to take care of us. Because that is God's will for human beings, to help other human beings. He's always told us that. He's always said, put no other gods before me. And that doesn't necessarily mean idols. That can be money, power, prestige, sex, or anything else. And then he said, do what you can for your fellow man. And if you'll do that, you'll be happy. And if that's his will for us, and if we follow it, then God will put us back in the garden, just like he put Adam and Eve back in the garden, whenever we turn self-will back to him. Now, if we've been thorough about our personal inventory, we've written down a lot. We have listed and analyzed our resentment. He doesn't say it, but we have also listed and analyzed our fears. We have also listed and analyzed our sex conduct of the past. We have begun to comprehend their futility and their fatality. We have commenced to see their terrible destructiveness. We have begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, even our enemies, for we look on them as sick people. My God, this is a hell of a personality change for an alcoholic already here in step 4. We're beginning to change to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, even our enemies. Man, that's quite a change. You see, we don't have to wait till we get through with the steps to get something good. We have listed the people we've hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. On all 3 of those sheets, we have people that we've hurt by our conduct of the past. We found out that many of the people we resented, we hurt. We found out many of the things and people we fear, we've hurt. And we find out there's many people we've harmed through our sexual conduct. So we have listed and analyzed many, many things. I think also what we need to do at the end of this sheet, if we've hurt other people in other ways, which most of us have, if we've stolen from them, if we've told lies about them which destroyed their reputation, if we've hurt other people in other ways, we probably ought to come to the last sheet and begin to list those also. And put down the name, what did we do to them, what part of self caused it, and what's the exact nature of the wrong. If we'll do that here at the end of the sexual conduct sheet, then when we get to 8 and 9, our list will be complete. And we need to list them and analyze them just like we have on the others. In this book, you read again and again that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. We hope you are now convinced that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from him. If you've already made a decision, step 3, and an inventory of your grosser handicaps, step 4, you have made a good beginning. That being so, you have swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself. You see, this wasn't too hard to do, was it? This wasn't a list of dirty, filthy, nasty things. This wasn't anything to be afraid of, nor is it anything that requires any deep analysis of ourselves. We simply list those things, look at them, analyze them to the best of our ability, and see what's within ourselves to let those things occur in the first place. And when we've been able to see that, then we can see primarily what our problem really is. I don't know whether you all have noticed or not, but the majority of the information in the big book on sex is found on page 69. Did you ever notice that? I don't know that that has any significance whatsoever, except the fact that is where the majority of the information on sex is found, on page 69. Somebody had a hell of a sense of humor. Wait a minute, yeah. Would you talk to him after the meeting? Now, I've got to tell you another little story. And the little story is about, again, a young lady. And she came to AA and she got sober, and about 90 days later she went to see her sponsor, and she was in a hell of a shape. And she said to the sponsor, sponsor said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "I'm having all kinds of trouble with this sex thing." She said, "I've never done sex sober, never tried to attract a member of the opposite sex sober, and I just don't know what to do or how to act, and I have no idea what I should do sober." And the sponsor said, "Well, about the only thing I can tell you to do is go home and get your big book out and very carefully read page 69. And she said, "You will find the answers to any problems you might have in that area on page 69. So the young lady returned home, got her big book out, and started to read 69, but she got confused. And instead of 69, she read page 96. Just for the hell of it, let's go see what she read on page 96. Some of you don't have your book with you, so I'll read it. "Do not be discouraged if your prospect does not respond at once. Search out another alcoholic and try again. You are sure to find someone desperate enough to accept with eagerness what you offer. We find it a waste of time to keep chasing a man who cannot or will not work with you. If you leave such a person alone, he may soon become convinced that he cannot recover by himself. To spend too much time on any one situation is to deny some other alcoholic an opportunity to live and be happy." And on and on and on and on. There really is a little humor in the book. Wow, how come? Oh, you want to explain yourself? You get 8 more? Okay. Explain that to Jim after the meeting. If Jim didn't get the other one, he sure as hell didn't get that one. Okay, before we quit, let's do step 5 real fast, and then we'll quit. Having made our personal inventory, what shall we do about it? We've been trying to get a new attitude, a new relationship with our Creator, and to discover the obstacles in our path. We have admitted certain defects. We have ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. We've put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. Now these are about to be cast out. This requires action on our part, which when completed will mean that we have admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our defects. Now that is not what the step says. The step says the exact nature of our wrongs. But you'll notice here in the narrative, he didn't use the word wrongs, he used the word defects. And every time he mentions this, he talks about defects rather than wrongs. And again, people would go to Bill and ask him about this. Why do you use wrongs in 5, defects in 6, shortcomings in 7? And he always answered the same thing. You don't use the same words over and over and over. It'll show how dumb you really are. He said there's no difference. He said in step 4, these are the things that we find that block us off from the sunlight of the Spirit. In step 5, we talk about them to another human being. In 6, we get ready to get rid of them. And in 7, we ask God to take them away. And he said it really doesn't make any difference what you call them. You can call them a wrong, a defect, a fault, a mistake, and you'll find that Bill has used these words interchangeably on the next few pages, back and forth, never paying any attention to where he puts them. And I've heard AA meetings where they talked for hours about the differences in them. And Bill says there are no differences at all, and I think we'll be able to see that. Here's the first real indication of that. It said this brings us to the fifth step in our program of recovery mentioned in the preceding chapter. This is perhaps difficult, especially discussing our defects with another person. And there he did it again. He didn't say wrongs, he said defects. We think we've done well enough in admitting these things to ourselves. There is doubt about that. In actual practice, we usually find a solitary self-appraisal insufficient. Many of us thought it necessary to go much further. We will be more reconciled to discussing ourselves with another person when we see good reasons why we should do so. The best reason first, if we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. And I think that's about as good a reason as I can think of. But now he tells us why that's true. He said, time after time, newcomers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives. Trying to avoid this humbling experience, they've turned to easier methods. Almost invariably, they got drunk. Having persevered with the rest of the program, they wondered why they failed. Well, we think the reason is that they never completed their house cleaning. They took inventory all right, but hung on to some of the worst items in stock. They only thought they had lost their egoism and fear. They only thought they had humbled themselves. But they had not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty in the sense we find it necessary until they told someone else all their life story. And that statement is what caused all the confusion back in step 4. But if we've really done step 4, as the book says, we have shared all our life story resentment-wise, because resentments have been popping in our head throughout our entire lifetime. We've gone back through our lives resentment-wise. We've shared all our life story fears-wise, and we've shared all our life story in the harming of other human beings. Most of us have been hurting people forever. And in those 3 gross handicap areas, we have shared all our life story. I don't think the guy I take step 5 with gives a damn where I was born. He isn't interested in how old I am. He isn't interested in where I graduated from school. What he wants to know is, Charlie, what is the exact nature of your wrongs? He doesn't care how many times I've stolen. What he wants to know is, why did you steal? He's not concerned with how many times I committed adultery. What he wants to know is, why do you commit adultery? He's not interested in a lot of stuff. He simply wants to know the exact nature. Now, here's why that's so important. More than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. He is very much the actor. To the outer world, he presents his stage character. This is the one he likes his fellows to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, but knows in his heart he doesn't deserve it. We are the world's greatest actors. Oh, Jesus, we can walk down the street just dying inside, feeling like hell, sicker than people are in hospitals, and somebody says, how are you this morning, Jim? Oh, Jim said, by God, I'm just great. Oh, I feel fine, And we're never going to let people see inside ourselves. We want people to like us. We want to enjoy the reputation. But deep in our heart, we know things that are going on. And we don't really deserve that reputation that we try to put to the rest of the world. But we are good at it. We're the finest. He says, the inconsistency is made worse by the things he does on his spree. Coming to his senses is revolted at certain episodes he vaguely remembers. These memories are a nightmare. He trembles to think someone might have observed him. As fast as he can, he pushes his memories far inside himself. He hopes they will never see the light of day. He is under constant fear and tension, and that makes for more drinking. Psychologists are inclined to agree with us. We've spent thousands of dollars for examinations. We know but few instances where we've given these doctors a fair break. We have seldom told them the whole truth, nor have we followed their advice. It really doesn't make sense. We'll go to a psychiatrist and we'll pay him $75, $100 an hour. We'll lay down on his couch and we'll lie to him the whole damned hour we're there. We're not about to let anybody really see inside ourselves. We have become the world's greatest con artists, and I think the one we con more than anybody else is ourselves. We saw what we did with resentment. I don't believe we could live with ourselves if we couldn't do those things. You have to develop those kind of skills to live in the world and be a practicing alcoholic at the same time. You just got to do that. Now, why would I think in step 4 that I'm going to be 100% honest with me? No, sirree. I am so good at lying to me, it's impossible for me to be honest with me. I can't even be honest with me today. I'm so good at this, you can sit here with a $100 bill sticking out of your pocket and I can steal it, and you give me about 30 seconds. And I can figure out why you needed that $100 bill stolen. And give me another 30 seconds, and I'll figure out how I did you a hell of a favor by taking your $100 bill and really believe every damn bit of it. Now, I think the real purpose of step 5 is this. We know that confession is good for the soul. But I think the real purpose of step 5 is for that other human being who can view my inventory objectively and truthfully to help me see my character defects. But I was amazed by this. You know, in some of those things where I had them listed down that it was caused by the sex instinct, he said, "Oh, no, Charlie, sex didn't have anything to do with this at all." He said, "Here you were trying to build your self-esteem." And I honestly couldn't see that. And another one where I might say, I did this out of fear, he'd say, "Oh, no, this is plain damn dishonesty." He could help me see those things within me that needed to be changed. And that's the real purpose of step 5, is to extract every bit of information I can about me. Page 74, he tells us how to find somebody to take step 5 with. What am I doing, my coffee? Here it is. In the old days, when the book first came to St. Louis, Chicago, Los Angeles, there wasn't any other AA members. There wasn't any sponsors. And the new man had a hard time finding somebody to take step 5 with. And this whole page 74 is designed to help the new person determine who to take a step 5 with. 13 years later in the 12 and 12, he said it might be better to take it with your own sponsor, because probably your sponsor knows more about you than anybody else. And my criteria for picking a person to take step 5 with is, have they done step 4 and 5? And have they done it according to the book? And do they know what I'm trying to do? If they do, they can probably help me. But if they haven't done 4 and 5, or if they didn't do it according to the big book, and I've taken my inventory according to the big book, then they're not going to know what the hell I'm talking about anyhow. So I think that's the criteria. You all are going to be the step 5ers of the future, because you're going to know how to do your inventory and how to do step 5 according to the big book Alcoholics Anonymous. You will be the step 5ers of the future. That's why I always love to do these things, because we're developing a whole new group of people here that know how to do this according to the big book. Now, it tells me on page 75, when we decide who is to hear our story, we waste no time. We have a written inventory and we're prepared for a long talk. We explain to our partner what we're about to do and why we have to do it. He should realize that we are engaged upon a life and death errand. Most people approached in this way will be glad to help. They will be honored by our confidence. We pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every twisted character, every dark cranny of the past. Now, here's the result. Once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, we are delighted. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs. In step 2, we came to believe. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. Through step 3, 4, and 5, we are now beginning to become different human beings. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel we are on the broad highway walking hand in hand with the Spirit of the universe. Oh, isn't that great? Isn't it great that we don't have to wait till step 12 to get something? Here we're getting these things already. Returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. Now here he gives us a little rest stop. And if you've done step 3, 4, and 5 to the best of your ability, you probably need a little rest stop, okay. But you'll notice he said an hour. He didn't say 38 days. He said 1 hour. Carefully reviewing what we've done, we thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know Him better. The prayer in step 5 is a prayer of thanks. Taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we have omitted anything. For we are building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. We're building the personality change. We're building the spiritual experience. We're building the arch. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? Step 1 was the foundation, willingness. Step 2 was the cornerstone, belief. Step 3 was the keystone, decision. Now in steps 4 and 5, we put some other stones in place. And we're building our arch, and we will ultimately walk through that arch as a free person at last. Oh, I think this is something great. I really do. I think we ought to stop for the night.
This will conclude the second part of Charley's discussion of Chapter 5, How It Works, the 4th step, Inventory Process, and the first part of Chapter 6, Into Action, Step 5. please go to tape number 10 of this 12-tape set of recordings for his discussion of Chapter 6 into Action Steps 6 through 11.